Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural analyst. And today we're going to be reviewing and talking about a movie that just came out. Now, if you remember a few months ago on one of my channels, I did review the movie Nefarious about a demon-possessed prisoner who was explaining Satan's plan, the fallen angel Lucifer's plan to destroy people's lives in the 21st century. And that was a positive review. I gave a totally positive review on that. I do highly recommend everyone going and seeing Nefarious, if you can find it, or waiting for DVD or online streaming. But it's definitely a movie that every Christian needs to hear because it deals with a biblical topic, the reality of Satan, the reality of evil, and how we as Christians need to be aware of that. If we're not aware of it, we'll fall prey to it. So that's a definite movie to see. Put that on your list of movies to catch. The next movie that I want to highlight is one that just hit the box office on July 4th, and that is the movie The Sound of Freedom. And this movie has taken the nation by storm. It was released on the same day as the Indiana Jones final sequence of that franchise, and it actually beat out Indiana Jones. Now, Indiana Jones is one of the biggest box office movies of all time, and the whole franchise built around Harrison Ford and his character Indiana Jones. So you have a lot of people, millions of people going just for the sake of seeing Harrison Ford, who's getting up there in age now, in his final role of Indiana Jones. But even with that star power, it did not outdo Sound of Freedom. Now, Sound of Freedom was produced or distributed by a small company in Utah named Angel Studios. It is a Mormon-based company owned by Mormons, and you shouldn't let that discourage you. I'm not saying that Mormons are Christians. I've already covered this in many videos. Mormons are not Christians. They believe in many gods. That's called polytheism. Polytheism is a pagan religious belief. It is not a Christian religious belief. Polytheism cannot be Christianity, and Christianity cannot be polytheism. So Mormons are not Christians, but that should not stop you from going and seeing a movie that is distributed by a company owned by Mormons, because they're actually doing some good work. They're also helping out in the production expenses, distribution of the TV series The Chosen. And so that is run by Christians. The Chosen actual movie is run by Christians, but it is getting some assistance from a business, Angel Studios, that is run by Mormons. So again, just because Mormons are involved should not disqualify Christians from going to see this movie, The Sound of Freedom. It's just like, for example, back about 8 years ago when Mitt Romney was running for president, and there was some concern among Christians, should we vote for a Mormon? Do we want to see a Mormon as president? Would we want to support a Mormon? Because of their strange and heretical understandings of religion. Like I said, they're polytheists. They believe that there are many gods. They have very strange doctrines coming from their very strange and heretical founder, Joseph Smith. For example, Joseph Smith taught that the God that we worshiped, the God of the Bible, started out as a man, like we are, and he grew into godhood. He, through his development of discipline and obedience and piety and holiness, he became God, and then he became the God of a planet. And then people pray to him and worship him in his godhood status. And they also believe, based on Joseph Smith's teaching, that you can become a god yourself, just like God did. And this is totally heretical. I mean, anybody who knows basic Bible understands that there is nothing like this taught in the Bible. So Mormons are not Christians. We don't need to confuse Mormonism and Christianity like some people do. For example, like the organizer and creator of the Chosen series, Dallas Jenkins, who is a Christian. He's the son of a famous evangelical author, Jerry Jenkins, who wrote along with Tim LaHaye, wrote the Left Behind series books. So wildly popular books. So Dallas Jenkins is a Christian, and yet he is allowing his relationships with Mormons to sort of confuse him and to begin to call Mormons brothers and sisters in Christ and so forth, as if they were Christians. They're not. That is not to say that there can't be a Christian in a Mormon church, or there can't be individual Christians in Mormonism, because maybe they don't understand Mormon theology, or they're confused about Mormon theology and they're more understanding traditional Christianity, but they happen to find themselves in the Mormon church. Yeah, there can be scattered about Mormonism Christians. But as far as the theology of what Mormonism teaches, what Joseph Smith taught, what Brigham Young taught, no, that is rank heresy. It cannot be ever brought in line with Christianity. The only way Mormonism, the whole church structure, could be brought within Christianity were they to repent and repudiate the teachings of their founder, Joseph Smith, and also later Brigham Young. And that could happen. That actually could happen. And actually, we should be praying that it does happen, because it did happen before in another cult. There was the Herbert W. Armstrong cult. I think it's called the Worldwide Church of God. And they had aberrant teachings and heretical teachings, and they were classified totally as a cult, along with, Jehovah's Witnesses and Christian Science and Mormonism. But the leaders over time began to understand the errors of their founder and actually led a transformation of the Worldwide Church of God to the point right now it is within the pale of evangelicalism, because they did repudiate some of their aberrant teachings, and they came in line with evangelicalism and refuted the teachings of Herbert W. Armstrong. So it can happen, and miracles like that do happen. We need to pray that it does happen in the case of the Mormonism, but it would really take a huge, fantastic, supernatural move of God to do that. And that's not saying it's impossible, but it would definitely take the supernatural to do that. But be that as it may, just because, for example, a movie studio, or distributing company is Mormon, doesn't mean that the product that they are producing is not true. And in the case of The Sound of Freedom, it is the case that this is a really, really good movie. I highly recommend it. Now, I've seen it, and it is basically the story of an individual who worked, I believe it was for the Office of Homeland Security, a man who was made aware of the child sex trafficking industry, international sex trafficking. And he became burdened to try to do something to help some of these kids that are basically kidnapped, enslaved. Some of them are drugged, forced into prostitution, essentially, by evil, wicked, cruel people. Not just men, but actually women too. In the movie, it actually shows a woman who approaches some of the little girls and say, "You're perfect for a model. We would like to show you how you could become a model and take some pictures." And it's all on the up and up. And the fathers would actually allow their daughters to take modeling classes, and then that's at some point, they are kidnapped, these girls, and then sold into sex trafficking. So it's a terrible, terrible topic. I mean, a lot of people don't want to think about it. A lot of people would rather not even imagine how bad this is, because it is an awful, terrible crime. And, we've heard in the news recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've heard about the awful, terrible crimes of someone like a Jeffrey Epstein at his pedophile island, where these rich and famous people, the elites, the jet set people of the world, fly in, and they engage in all kinds of pedophilia with children who are flown into the island. It's a really evil, sick, and twisted situation. And Jeffrey Epstein is dead now because it's still disputed as to what actually happened and what killed him in the New York prison. Was it suicide, like the official report says, or was it a murder, assassination by some of the wealthy elites who just don't want the information that he has out in the public? And we're talking some very famous international figures who have visited his island at one point or another. And so the question is, why are these people on his island, and what were they doing there? And was it just to have influence, meet other wealthy people, or was it something more sinister, involving pedophilia and so forth? So we're still not sure what has happened. Even after his death, I think it's been a year or two since his death, we still don't even know much about his operation on the island. It seems like there is a effort to try to suppress that information. So it could be that some of the wealthy elites in this world are really putting pressure on law enforcement and even governments to not divulge all of the information and names of people who are involved in this. But this movie deals with not something as high profile as a Jeffrey Epstein and his island of pedophiles. It's dealing with more of a hidden secret the movie dealt with what was taking place in South America and Central America, and North America also. So it's basically the Americas, but this is a problem all over the world. Asia, places like Thailand, Bangkok. These are places that they actually have sex tourism, they're called. And people fly in from all over the world in places like Bangkok, Thailand. And for some reason, that nation has just these very loose and liberal prostitution and sex laws, where you can basically find any kind of sexual perversion that you want and pay for it there. And this is not just limited to places like Thailand, but it's all over Asia, India. It's found. Eastern Europe is especially known for this problem. You might have seen the movie starring Liam Neeson called Taken. I think there were 1, 2, or 3 movies on that franchise made. But it deals with the problem of sex trafficking, because in that movie, Liam Neeson's daughter was traveling in Europe after high school, and she was abducted and taken and sold into sex trafficking. And so the movie is all about Liam Neeson going after these sex traffickers and trying to bring his daughter back, which he, in fact, was able to do successfully. So that ended on a good note. But a lot of cases, these parents look for their child after their child has been abducted, and they can never find them. They're sold into some dark, faraway corner of the world by boat or even airplane or train, and they're shuttled away to some secret place where they spend the rest of their life as a sex slave. It's just a really terrible, evil, wicked. You can see how someone like the devil, Lucifer, would be involved in this and inspiring men and women to participate. I mentioned women. In the movie, it actually shows women involved in the facilitating of pedophilia. And we saw that, of course, with the news headlines with Jeffrey Epstein's Island. There was that Giselle, I think her name is, Giselle. She was his assistant, and she would actually lure some of these teenage girls and young women to the island and reassure them that everything was going to be okay. And she was sort of the false comfort that really the confidence that these young girls put in her as sort of an older woman figure. And lo and behold, we see the same thing happening in this movie, The Sound of Freedom, where there is an older woman, probably about the age of these young girls' mother, who reassures them and flatters them and says, oh, you're model material, and dresses them up and shows them how to model and pose, and really builds on their self-confidence and ego. And then at the last moment, she is the one that basically leads these girls like a Pied Piper into the hands of the sex traffickers and sells them on the open market, sort of like slave market, where these girls are sold to the highest bidder. So it's really a sick and twisted world. Now, it's interesting that the reaction, even though this movie is doing really well right now, as at the time of this video, it's been about a week since this was released, the 4th of July. And what's really interesting is that the mainstream media and the major institutions of this country, newspapers, mainstream media, a lot of the left, radical left, and Democratic controlled institutions, they really are looking down at this movie. For some strange reason, you would think because of the supposed compassion that they say they have, and the supposed empathy and sympathy they have for the downtrodden and the marginalized, that's what they say. You would think that the left would be all over this movie and be touting it and saying, everyone go see this movie. It is really exposing the terrible, awful world of sex trafficking of children. But a lot of times it's actually the opposite of that. For example, some of the leading newspapers trashed this movie and called it more of a conspiracy theory, and or a QAnon conspiracy. I guess they're saying that child sex trafficking is not as bad as the movie portrays. It's really hard to understand what the motivation, why you would oppose and push back on a movie that was exposing something as evil and heinous as sex trafficking of children. Rolling Stones, another influential leftist magazine, criticized the movie, calling it basically like virtue signaling. You're trying to appear like you're so goody two-shoes in trying to talk about something like child sex trafficking. Well, yeah, you can virtue signal, and there are celebrities, mostly the left, that does this. It's mostly Hollywood types that love to virtue signal. They like to find a fashionable cause and then latch onto that and say, see how virtuous I am. I'm for this cause. And yeah, that can always happen. But in this case, it actually is true that there are children being sold into slavery, into prostitution, and it's all happening under the radar. Now, there are law enforcement officers full-time on the crime, and they are tracking people down and trying to make arrests, but it's a massive, massive problem. And I know that I think everybody that you speak with, when you ask them about this, they're going to say, yeah, that's a terrible thing. It needs to be stopped. So why would the left want to tear down and run down this movie. I think it has to do just with the problem that they didn't come up with this movie themselves. This is not a leftist movie. This was not created in Hollywood. This does not come from their perspective. This does not carry all of the gender ideology and the wokeism and all the baggage of the left with it. It's just dealing with a problem, a very real problem today. Millions of children are involved in basically slavery. They're enslaved all over the world, even in the United States, which was really shocking to me. There are, and the movie shows this, there are pedophile websites, there are pedophile groups. They exchange pedophile movies, they exchange pedophile videos and pictures. And there are even websites and maybe on the dark web that basically facilitate sex with children here in the United States. So this is shocking. It needs to be exposed. Now, I've been critical of some celebrities who do latch onto causes just for the fact of trying to virtue signal, or in other words, to show how concerned they are and how aware they are, socially aware, and trying to say, see how good I am, I support this cause, or I donate to this cause. And people who are celebrities often do this to try to, not because they're concerned so much about the issue, but because they think being associated with that cause will help their status in celebritydom. And so I've been critical of that, even in the Christian world. You know, you have the problem of the killing of unborn children. You know, millions of children every year are killed through abortion. And you don't hear many Christian celebrities, Christian musicians and singers and high-profile Christians talking about the evils of abortion and being pro-life and supporting the pro-life cause. You don't hear that. But then when it comes to some cause that's popular in the secular world, all of a sudden they're all against, sex trafficking and all kinds of things. So I've been critical of the virtue signaling that goes on among celebrities, even Christians. But in this case, this movie is not trying to virtue signal. I mean, everybody knows or does somewhat know that there is a problem about children being kidnapped and sold into sex trafficking, but they don't know the extent of it. And I think this movie is shocking in the sense that it shows a little bit of the operation of how this can come about. And this is a big problem all over the world. It's a problem in Europe, for example. It's a problem in Russia. It's a problem in the former Soviet Union nations, where you have women who are undergoing poverty and grinding poverty, and they get an opportunity. They sign up for some kind of modeling career, or they sign up for some acting career. They're told that if you come to this big city like Bucharest or some Eastern European city, you will be given the chance to audition for a career in acting. So they travel from the country into the big city, and then you never hear about them because they've been taken into slavery, sex trafficked, and prostituted out by some very evil, wicked, organized crime sometimes. There's big money in this and big business, and evidently wealthy clients are willing to pay big bucks to utilize these prostitutes, that even child prostitution. So, and now this movie deals more with the child end of the sex trafficking problem, but there's a huge, huge problem in generalized sex trafficking and exploiting women. But it's even worse to imagine that a small child is being exploited in this way. And it's particularly evil for a child because it does show what happens to the child. It's like they're being used and abused at that early age. And these are things that are going to haunt them the rest of their life, even when they escape, even if they are able to get out in a year or 2 or 3 or run away. These things are going to be in their memories for the rest of their life, and it's going to damage them emotionally. So this is a big problem, not even to mention the fact that many of these children later on go on to do things like commit suicide or go into a life of crime and prostitution on their own, because that's what they've grown up and known. And they're so damaged psychologically and spiritually. So this is a really good movie to see. And it shows someone who got concerned and decided that he was going to make it his calling and life mission. He felt he was called from God, by God, to rescue as many of these kids as he could. And so just this movie raising awareness of this problem hopefully will help, because it will give motivation and impetus for the politicians and the lawmakers, and it will give them motivation to actually pass some laws and make it really, really tough. Now, not that there aren't laws on the books already, but yeah, this is one of those issues that can get marginalized. It can get forgotten because there are all these other political and moral and spiritual issues that we have in the news all the time. And this is one that sort of can get overlooked and put on the sidelines because you're not actually seeing the crimes being committed. It's all done in secret, which the movie does depict and bring out. So it can raise awareness. I would definitely go see this movie. The production value is fantastic. It's not one of those low-budget, traditional Christian movies that is big on content and light on production value. No, it is a professional, polished, quality production, lighting, cinematography, name brand actors, famous actors were in this. Directors are excellent. And so it's definitely something that is of quality, and it really uncovers a problem that is easy to overlook. And so we as Christians, while this is not the only thing that we have to pray about and be concerned about, this is something that we as Christians should definitely have on our prayer list, to pray for these children who are caught and ensnared in this sex trafficking industry, this multi-million or billion-dollar worldwide industry. Pray for their families, that their families can work with law enforcement and get their child back, and pray ultimately that this whole industry could be made to disappear, could be totally erased. It's totally evil. It's totally of the devil. And we need to pray that God raises up men and women to fight this and put an end to it, because there's no place in this world for this kind of activity. This sex trafficking of women is totally evil. Well, I hope that's been an encouragement for you to go see this movie, and we'll see you back next week. God bless.